Great, everyone. So lovely to see you. Welcome to the August 2025 webinar from the TELedvisors Network, Making the Invisible Visible. It's an in-depth look at a framework for learning designers for evidencing learning design practice, and we're so happy to have the three authors of the framework as our facilitators today, Jenny, Tanya, and Sue. So Jenny Boreland has over 25 years experience in education, including 16 years in higher education in 3 Australian universities. She's held both academic and professional roles and has worked extensively with international students, higher degree research candidates, and in executive and professional education. Currently, she manages a team of learning designers and is committed to supporting them and promoting their contribution to creating quality educational experiences positive. And Tanya has over 20 years of experience in education with expertise in programmatic assessment, curriculum design, and project management. As the strategic lead, assessment transformation, she provides strategic leadership and mentorship to a team of faculty-based learning designers who are driving assessment transformation as part of the University of Queensland's Lead Through Learning strategy. And Sue Sharp is an educator and equity practitioner with 15 years experience working in higher education in a variety of roles, including learning designer, education-focused academic, and course director. She is currently lecturer of inclusive education at Deakin, an academic development role where she helps to bring an equity lens to current areas of change such as assessment and generative AI. So I'd like very much to welcome you all and to hand over to Sue to start the presentation.
Thanks so much, Penny. So before we start, I'd like to acknowledge country. We meet today on many different lands, and we'd like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of each of these lands, particularly the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, custodians of Naarm, Melbourne, where I am now, and the Turrbal and Yagara people, custodians of the places that Jenny and Tanya are currently. We recognise that the traditional custodians have an unbroken connection to land, water, sky, and community. We pay respects to their elders past, present, and those yet to come. Indigenous Australians have always had spaces where those from near and far can gather to listen, share stories and other knowledge in the same way, but transformed as we are now. As we gather from many different places right now, I invite you to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands where you're located and to tell us where that place is so that we can learn more about the people and the places that met here before us. So I'd like to give a bit of an overview of what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to have a look at the framework itself. What is it, who's it for, and how might it be helpful? Then we're going to have a discussion about evidence and impact. And Jenny's going to give some examples of the framework in action. After that, we're going to have a chance to practice using the framework yourselves in breakout rooms. But please, if you hate breakout rooms, don't leave. I know that there's a quiet hatred of breakout rooms and for some people and others love them. I'm someone who loves them, but we are going to trial a specific breakout room just for those who want to stay quiet and keep cameras off and do some thinking by yourself. So we'll have some more detail on that when we get to it, but you won't be asked to interact if you don't want to. So Jenny, Tanya and I met at the Herzer conference and got to know each other across several years. And at that time, I was an education designer. I'm now an academic developer. And Jenny and Tanya were learning designers then and now managing other learning designers. We were spread across 2 different states and 3 different institutions, but we had a common issue. So before we talk about that issue, I just want to hear a little bit more about who you are. I know that some of you have already been putting this into the chat, but if you haven't already, can you please let us know what role are you, what's your institution, your state, if you'd like, whatever you'd like to share, and Jenny and Tanya will read a little bit out. Who are the people here today, Jenny and Tanya?
We've got people from Uni Western Australia, and a newish learning designer, which is great. We've got Juliana, who's got a secret passion to be a learning designer. So I'm not sure whether Juliana is or isn't, or where Juliana's from. Uni Sunshine Coast, ed designer. All the different names are coming out as I'm looking through here. Got Karen as an education designer at Monash.
So lots of ed designers, lots of learning designers, a few people who've got similar names that are similar roles, yeah, or completely different titles that are similar roles, yeah. So as ed designers and learning designers, most of you probably will have a similar issue to what we identified. And that issue was evidence, lack of it. And without that invisibility, we didn't have enough evidence to justify the costs that our teams and ourselves incurred. We wanted more evidence to show that, to create more role stability. We wanted to create a reputation that helped us in our relational work. We wanted evidence to help us with our promotions, our HEA applications, and other fellowships, to help us seek other work if we wanted to work outside the field. Now, Altina, Lai and Hines in 2024 published and described Australian learning designers as change makers and capacity builders, but also largely hidden figures working in university back rooms without many available career pathways. So according to their study, lack of career progression is a key reason for learning designers to leave the university sector. And this all characterises learning designers as people with huge impact on higher education, but without the accompanying recognition and reward for that impact. An Inside Higher Ed blog in 2020 put it pretty bluntly, but fairly clearly, instructional or learning designers are the Sherpas of online teaching and learning. So it seems as if learning designers have an image problem. Senior management seems confused as to the details of the job. Unis are not aware of why you need learning designers. They haven't defined the role as part of the organisational structure. The quotes here are all from learning designers interviewed in the Altina study, and they're showing that the cost of that invisibility is the university executive not knowing what LDs do. And these are the people that have the power to approve roles, to make them more stable, to keep them or remove them in a restructure. So it's a problem. Perhaps evidence could change that. We wanted to transform the invisible into something visible.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue, and hello, everybody. I apologise for my croaky voice. I thought I could actually evade a virus throughout winter, but in the last few days I have been struck down with a virus. So my apologies for sounding very croaky today. The evidence framework was inspired by existing evaluation models. The framework builds on Smith's 4Q model of evaluation and Western Sydney's framework for evidencing academic teaching practice. We have adapted these to suit the unique context of learning designers. The framework is grounded in design practice and literature and draws on our experience as learning designers within 3 different Australian universities. The framework was shaped by feedback and data from presentations Jenny and I hosted at HRSA conferences over a number of years. And with that feedback, it ensures that it reflects the real-world challenges and needs of third space professionals. Next slide, please, Sue. The framework is a tool for evidencing impact. It helps learning designers document and demonstrate the value of their contributions to teaching and learning. It goes beyond just listing skills and tasks that we undertake within our roles. It is a very flexible approach. It's more as a guide, and we see it as a front page or a summary of somebody's professional portfolio, and it's able to be contextually adapted to people's different roles, career stages, and of course, where people sit within institutions. We initially saw it as a career planning resource, and we wanted it to very clearly, intentionally support reflection, goal setting, and strategic thinking about our professional development. We wanted to have some recognition, and we also wanted to have some career progression. Next slide, please, Sue. So The framework is not a skills or competency checklist. The framework doesn't acknowledge skills. It doesn't acknowledge what we do on a task base. It is an evidence of practice. It is a way to evidence impact and evidence of what we have achieved. It is not a one-size-fits-all model. It is not prescriptive, and not everybody will complete every section of the framework. You can select a part of the framework or a dimension that is relevant to you, and you can collate evidence within your own context and your own career goals. The framework does require active engagement and thoughtful use. And it is important to actually discuss this with your institution. And I think aligning it with your annual career goals and planning is really important. Next slide, please, Sue. The challenge that many of us face is when good learning design impacts the visibility of an effective learning designer. The invisibility of education design does not address how a learning design can evidence their impact. Sometimes it is even impossible to know a learning designer's impact. Yet measuring the impact of learning design is critical to improving practice and developing pathways for career progression. Next slide, please, Sue. So now I'd like to ask all of you a question, which is, why do you think it's important to evidence impact? And what is the benefit of doing that? So essentially, what is the value of evidencing impact as a learning designer or somebody within the third space? I know we've got some people in the room who are education designers or curriculum designers, but if you could put into chat what your thoughts are, please. Yeah, that's good, Mark. Demonstrate one's values to an organisation. Does anybody have any other thoughts that they would like to share?
Show how clever you are. I think that's fantastic. But Leanne, I love the worthy investment part. If you're showing value, it's a worthy investment.
Capturing the scope and expertise of our roles, I think that's very nice, because we do know that the scope and expertise is very varied across the learning design field.
And
For
it's
feedback.
nice to see the comments about being able to help the students as well, like that too.
Yes, that good learning design doesn't happen by accident. I like that. We're very intentional with what we do.
The credibility part's important as well, I think, that Madeline shared. It's not just credibility to others, but it also helps you to feel really confident when you're having conversations with people that, you know, we're having conversations at all levels. And so that can be a challenge if you don't feel as if you look credible. I think that's really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, to identify if new technologies are working as intended. I like that. Reduces the cognitive load. I like that too. Excellent. There's some great thoughts there. Thank you. Next slide, Sue. When we first developed the framework, we were thinking about how impact was important, and we were thinking about supporting the value proposition of collaboration, because we all work with other people within the university sector. And we wanted to guide our engagements very intentionally. What would success look like in each of our engagements? We wanted to be able to provide evidence to institutions of the impact of what good design is and what the student outcomes are. And I noticed many people have put things similar to that in the chat, which is fantastic. There have been a number of people who have started to use and engage with the framework, and we've had some feedback that they've actually used it in some different ways, which is really exciting to what we had initially thought. But we can see how the framework can be used in these ways. And those ways include identifying gaps within our career progression. What areas are we not working on? And perhaps should we be working on those? And how can we work on those by job crafting? It prompts us to highlight our achievement, which I think is really important. Captures the depth of people's work and allows people to capture their work all in one space. So that was really lovely to have the feedback from people who have been engaging with this to date. I'm now going to hand over to Jenny, who will provide some real-life examples from people who are using the framework. Thank you.
Thanks, Tanya. And Thanks, Sue, as well, for all that background. I have to say, as Tanya sort of mentioned a little bit there, that the application story with the framework has really developed since our initial presentation last year at the Third Space Symposium, and just acknowledging some of the colleagues actually who I think are in the room who have been telling us about the ways that they've been using it really interestingly and creatively. We hope to maybe unpack some of that a little bit later. But just for now, I thought I'd share a couple of stories about how this has been used in our organisation. These are real people, real stories, as only you would expect from a university for the real world. So let's just move on to the next slide, Sue, thanks, and I'll give you the first one here. So this is the one that is the curriculum design and implementation dimension. Very quick background on this. There was an issue with grade distributions across assessments in a postgrad unit. It was flagged repeatedly at an examiner's meeting. So the LD actually worked with the academic, undertook a full review of the unit's assessments, total rewrite of all the rubrics and all the things, all the other things that were associated with that, instructions and all that sort of stuff. The impact of that undertaking was evidenced in informal feedback from the academic, which was retained as evidence, and the examinations report that came back after the next delivery, which was very positive. If that sounds like you, just give us a little thumbs up in the chat on your little emoticons, if you can relate to any of these as I go through them. So how was this evidence, though, used to make the work more visible? So what happened was that having this really good example was the LD was able to take that and use that in collaborations with other academics. It was then used as an example of the impact of good design in meetings with other course teams in that particular faculty. And so what happens is that you can see using the impact, using the evidence, making visible what can be achieved is quite easy to do when you've got something to back it up. It's fairly straightforward example. The LD's profile, this was a senior learning designer with over 10 years experience in learning design. The next one is, thanks Sue, is a student-centered design example. This was a situation where there was a lot of really poor student feedback about content and the structure of the content over both semester and in a unit site. So with the LD with the UC, reviewed the structure of the content, then updated and revised the whole unit completely, got hold of the unit end of unit feedback survey data, which showed, as you can see here, that there was a significant impact from the work that was done. And then again, how was the evidence used to make that work more visible? So that again was an example where this was taken and used in other collaborations with other faculties as examples of the good work and the impact, and a very significant impact with a 10% increase in student satisfaction. And that taps into some of the comments that you put in the chat earlier about why impact's important. But then it was used in a performance and planning review discussion with a manager. And so that's another thing that we've alluded to around your careers and your planning and what you're doing and evidencing the work that you're doing. What was interesting with this one, though, was then the manager, who wasn't me, after that discussion, then subsequently used this example in management discussions about the role of LDs in quality teaching and learning, and how important that is as a continuing resource in an institution. And so you can see that it has that flow-on effect of raising visibility. Again, I think Elaine put something in the chat about, you know, if we can raise this with our institutions and show the value of design, we can have those discussions about resourcing and supporting those people or those roles. So why do I mention this one in particular? This person was a learning designer who only had 3 years experience. And it highlights two things to me. First, it means you don't have to be a senior learning designer to have an impact. And it also suggests to me that sometimes you don't actually realise the impact you're going to have at an institutional level. So something simple about sharing impact and sharing evidence and making something a little bit visible can actually have broader ramifications. Thanks, Sue. The next one is really interesting. I really like this one because this is the impact of this one was so personal. So this was a learning designer who worked on the development of a professional education program for Indigenous nurses and all the things that went along with that. It was a big program. When the nurses graduated, the learning designer was invited along and was then presented with this certificate, which happens to be a giant glass block, which is amazing. It looks beautiful. And this was recognition of her contribution to the development of the course and the program. So you can see that this fits into this dimension of recognition and reward. How is the evidence then used to make this more visible? Well, you can't be much more visible than getting this giant thing at a graduation ceremony, so that was pretty obvious. But subsequently, this manager, who actually is me because it's the professional-led people, I took that and wrote an article for a school newsletter where I mentioned this as an example of how we can highlight the value of learning designers generally. And so again, it's that way of using this evidence to be able to promote and make more visible the work that we do.
Stop.
Sorry? Oh, okay. So what else happened? Two other interesting things with this one. The learning designer off her own bat wrote an email to the other learning designers in her team and shared, you've got on the screen just a little part of that. And this was actually really impactful because it gave her a really improved sense of professional identity and value. And she was able to share that with the team as well, which was a really lovely thing. This learning designer has no formal training in education or learning design. She came to learning design via a tech route, which goes to prove you don't have to have a degree in learning design to make an impact either. So just a bit of encouragement for people there who don't follow that path. Okay, last one. Sue, so we're on to the last one, which is this one, and I share this one. I'm not giving you a lot of background on this. I'm showing you this as an example because it's just really interesting the way this happened. This was a professional development piece that fits into the professional development dimension of the framework, and it led to some promotion and sharing of quality design in a faculty meeting. So that was the first thing that happened. And so the professional development opportunity was then translated using the evidence to say, well, hang on, and I think someone mentioned this in the chat before about building confidence. I now know more about this stuff. I'm now able to disseminate some of this and share this with other people. So that was the first thing. But then it actually gave rise to thinking about how that experience could possibly turn into something else. And so this is what Tanya was talking about using the framework with a bit more intent to say, well, could I maybe participate in a working party? Could I perhaps do a conference paper or a presentation and partner maybe with an academic if I'm not confident to do it myself? But it starts people thinking about some of those things and making some more intentional decisions about what you might do. So those are some very tangible examples. But when you first start and are introduced to the framework, for those of you who haven't seen it, Sue's going to flick to the next slide and show you the full thing. Thanks, Sue. So this is where you would really normally start. Obviously, you're not going to start with all those very specific examples that I've given you. You're likely to start with a bigger picture in mind and look at it holistically. And I know some of you have probably done this previously. I know some of you are already using it, which is just, yes, really exciting. But what might it look like when you start with this big picture? So Sue, can you show one that's been done up? So this is just an example of what it could look like. This is a pretend me version. So this is not a real person from the real world for a real university. I've ticked the things that I could, for example, say, yes, I can do these things. I can gather evidence about this stuff and I can think about the impact of those things. I've put question marks against things that I'm not sure about, that I might go, yeah, maybe. I've crossed off things that just are not my thing, or I don't have the right role at this point in time, or perhaps I feel like I'm not senior enough to be working in some of those areas. And then I've got some notes about, well, this is something that I might actually want to have a think about at some point in the future. I might want to pursue some of these things and see whether I could go down. And again, that's that idea of the intentionality for it. So if I had started with that, there's lots of different ways that you would be able to capture this information and keep then your records. I know some people have been using a spreadsheet and just sticking with the core dimensions and not worrying about all the examples. Other people might want to just do it in a Word document. You might be very creative and use Adobe Express and build a portfolio website, which would be super cool and fun. Jira boards, Padlet notes, whatever it is, it's just whatever suits you. So on that, I'll just make a couple of notes, Sue, on the next one that reiterate a little bit about some of the things that Tanya said. So just with the framework, first of all, it's a tool to guide you, but not define what you do. It's never the intention. It's absolutely not comprehensive. We already found that out from a previous presentation last year. It's intended to be a flexible guide depending on your actual role requirements, your immediate supervision. We've flagged that in the chat as well. Organisational structure can impact institutional culture. Institutional policies might have an influence on how you might use it, and obviously your career stage and your experience, and of course work-life balance and other commitments that are outside. So it's not marked, it's not checked. There is no body in higher education authority or anything else who's checking it. And I say yet because one day you never know. There's always potential. So it was written and created for you by learning designers to make it work for you and in your context, and we're using obviously in our context. So in a second, we're going to jump into those breakout rooms so that you can have a little play with it. And Sue's already flagged that if you're not keen to do that, that's absolutely fine. Just I think, what do you do, Sue? You just say decline.
Yeah, so decline the room when it gives you the option. If you don't want to be in a breakout room chatting to others, and we will put you, after everyone else, will pop you into your own room. I'm going to stop sharing now, and Tanya's going to put the questions into the chat if she hasn't already. There's also oh, sorry, you go, Jenny.
Oh, you're right. Okay, so those Sue's going to put you into breakout rooms. You will have access to the framework. You will have those questions. There's 4 of them. We're going to pop you in for about 15 minutes. And just work through them. There's an amazing diversity of institutions represented here, and that's incredible, because I think that will lead to some really interesting and rich conversations. And if you don't get through them all, it's not an exam. No one's checking. It's fine. Sue might when she brings you back after for a bit of a conversation. So you'll all disappear shortly. Have a play with it, have a chat, and we'll see you back here soon. And again, if you didn't want to go out, just hang around for a bit and we'll go from there. Thanks.
I've put the discussion questions in chat, so you'll be able to access those from your breakout rooms. I've also put a link to the framework, which you can access both now and into the future. So you've got that as a reference point to guide some conversations.
Hi there. Sorry, I need to jump out, but thank you so much for I just jumped in kind of briefly because I need to go to a meeting, but thank you so much. This is a really interesting talk. Thank you.
Thanks, Meredith.
So really, I just wanted to say thank you for coming along. And while Jenny's working on that, what we just wanted to share with you is our contact details if you do want to contact us further about the framework. We'll also share a QR code if you wanted to read the article that talks about why we created it and gives a little bit of background. I think Tanya's just posted that into the chat as well. And if you want a copy of the Learning Design Evidence Framework, we shared that earlier before you went into breakout rooms, but Tanya's shared that just again. And if you do want to share anything on social media about what you've been doing with the framework, then we've got the hashtag Learning Design Evidence for you to share under, so we can kind of collate that all together and see what people are doing. We've got some references that we used if you wanted to see those. And other than that, thank you so much for joining us. I hope you find this helpful. I hope that you can use it. And yeah, please let us know.
Thank you very much, all 3. Thanks everybody who's attended and contributed. That was a wonderful engaged, impactful session. So thank you so much.